Take some information.
My name is Marilène Oliver. I'm an associate professor of printmaking and media art at the University of Alberta in Canada. I prepared this presentation with my colleague, Professor Scott Smallwood, who works in music in composition. We are constantly warned that our personal data is vulnerable. We are told that it is used and abused by artificial intelligence, giant tech corporations, and controlling governments. But do we really understand what our data is, what it consists of, and what we can do to it and what others can do to it? Is it possible to unravel the complex entanglements of data gathering and automated processing technologies in order to see and understand what sociologist Deborah Lupton terms are human data assemblages in meaningful ways? Can virtual reality be used as a creative space to explore and situate our data, bodies temporally, geographically, and emotionally? The research project Know Thyself as a Virtual Reality, for which we now see the project website, has focused on these questions since 2019 through a series of interdisciplinary symposia, publications, research creation projects, and in 2023, an exhibition of virtual reality artworks made with medical scan data. The central recent creation project of Know Thyself was a diptych of VR artworks titled My Data Body and Your Data Body. My Data Body focuses on the data we generate and are responsible for as individuals, whereas Your Data Body questions how we interact with, understand, and are responsible for the data of others. Both the works use high-resolution volume-rendered medical scan data, such as MRI or CT scans, as well as other personal data, such as social media data, biometric data, LiDAR scans, poetry, and unique sonic compositions to create immersive and effective experiences that invite the user to think deeply about the data bodies they are seeing, hearing, touching, albeit mediated by a VR headset and controllers. My presentation this afternoon will focus specifically on Your Data Body, which employs the gaming device of having progressive levels that the user moves through as a way to think through different levels of consent and data ownership, starting with open access anonymized data and ending with data donated with active and ongoing consent and authorship. The first scene in Your Data Body collects open access medical data, scan data that was originally acquired for medical research, but has now been anonymized, so that legally it can be used for secondary research with Creative Commons licensing. Since personal information has either been removed or obscured, consent from the scan subject is not required for the use of these anonymized datasets. For Your Data Body, CT, MRI, and PET scan datasets were easily and freely downloaded from multiple open access research databases: the Cancer Imaging Archive, the National Library of Medicine, Embodied 3D, and Open Neuro. Additionally, openly available sample data for working with open source radiology software, 3D Slicer, Azirix Viewer, and MedDream were also downloaded. Once downloaded, the scan data was processed using 3D Slicer so that it could be imported into the gaming engine Unity, where it was placed in a web-like pod, much like insects caught in a spider's web. The pod was then nested within a LiDAR scan mesh of my home office, where the project was largely made as a way to acknowledge that it is ultimately the artisan researcher who is responsible for the treatment of anonymized data, as well as present where the data was being downloaded, transformed, and rendered. A medical data loader script was written for Unity so that using the VR controller's grabbing function, the user can pull the scan data parts out of the web structure, place them elsewhere in the scene, resize and recolor them. The invitation is to use the scan body parts like building blocks to create a Frankenstein-like figure. As the user brings the scanned body part close to them and then to their ear, like listening to a shell, they hear an automated voice reciting the information about the original research project and why the data was originally acquired.
24th of November 2020, with a break due to the COVID-19 pandemic beginning the 3rd of October 2020. Data collection resumed on the 20th of October 2020.
PHP provides a public domain library of cross-sectional cryosection (CT) and MRI images obtained from one male cadaver and one.
An additional layer of sound in the scene is an abstract sonification of the data usage agreements for each of the databases, which range in length from a few lines to 18 pages long. Each body part also emanates logos and icons from them like confetti, which relate to the institutional or commercial database visual identity or branding. The intention with this first scene is to invite users to reflect and question their relationship to open access personal data. When the user is in the first scene of your data body, they're able to hold the virtual head, chest, torso of another person in their own hands. The body part is to scale so that the user can relate to it with their own body. They can manipulate it and combine it with other anonymous body parts, where they know little about the subject, when the data was acquired, where the subject is now, and of course the subject has no idea that their virtual copy of themselves is being held by another person somewhere, someone in the world. Although arguably more uncanny and more embodied, this echoes many of our virtual interactions on social media, where we consume, comment, like, love posts from strangers sharing very intimate information and images of themselves. As explained earlier, consent is not legally required for anonymized data, as the data has been de-identified and cannot be connected to the subject. Anonymization, however, has become less reliable in the age of big data, smart devices, and social media, and anonymized datasets no longer offer the protections they once did. Furthermore, as more deep learning, machine learning algorithms are being applied to large aggregations of data, there is no assurance or even way of knowing if anonymized datasets are cross-referenced and thus re-identified. In order to test this theory of possible cross-referencing, I uploaded a volume rendering of my own MRI scan acquired from my data body to Facebook, and it tagged me instantly. A solution in the radiology community for the re-identification of scan data is defacing, which literally involves cutting away the face from head scans. Defacing is mandatory for a dataset to be uploaded to Open Neuro database, but as yet not to Embody 3D nor 3D Slicer. There is considerable debate over the efficacy and ethics of defacing. I personally was horrified when I first encountered a 3D rendering of a defaced dataset, for it resembles a head with its face violently axed off. Symbolically for me, a defaced 3D volume rendered dataset brutally symbolizes the crude and typically automated attempts to depersonalize and dehumanize human data. In an attempt as artists to rehumanize and repersonalize data in this scene, and indeed the whole Your Data Body artwork, Marie-Alice Conrad wrote a choral composition with Scott Smallwood that the user is enveloped by when they are within the dataset. Conrad and Scott worked with our university choir to make a multi-channel recording of the choir chanting "Anon, Anon, Anon." The next level in Your Data Body is made up of MRI and CT scans donated or given to the project specifically for creative purposes. Following academic research ethics procedures, an open call for scan data was disseminated through various academic email lists, as well as through direct requests to friends and family. In Consent to Our Data Bodies, Lessons from Feminist Theories to Enforce Data Protection, Paz Penna and Joanna Baron bring a feminist lens to thinking through consent to data usage. They point to the illusion that consent can be free, rational, and an individual choice. When a simple click can give access to a website, or in the case of some medical research projects, to potentially life-saving study, is there really a choice? In the same way that terms and conditions for social media sites are unreadable, is there a risk that research ethics information sheets and consent forms are equally unintelligible and so boring that they are not carefully read? Penna and Baron suggest that the act of consent needs to be active, clear and intelligible, informed, fully conscious, freely given, specific to a situation, retractable, and ongoing. With these healthier qualifiers of consent in mind, those who donated their data to Your Data Body project were shown the project during its many stages and given the option of retracting their permission or suggesting changes and being credited as an author. The intention in the second scene is to suggest a collective and consensual ritual of offering and receiving data. When the entity uses the scene, they are surrounded by data sets that swirl around them slowly. They are beneath a virtual sculpture of a 8-armed figure hanging down from above, seemingly reaching to catch or release data. The data is placed in 3 concentric rings around the viewer. Data from my close family and friends is in the first ring, the known colleagues in the second ring, and less familiar colleagues or friends of friends in the outer ring. The ring floats within a 360-degree videosphere of a forest of trees, shedding their autumn leaves captured close to where the work was made, signifying being in a time of harvest. Beside the dome are various LiDAR scans of circular structures, such as a topiary-trained tree, stone circle, and a large lily pond. From above fall the words from a chant-like poem written by the poet J.R. Carpenter about the desire for embodied connection in a virtual world. And if the user grabs or touches any of the data, it starts to glow with a warm and pulsing light. As the user moves closer to the scans, they hear human voices either reciting or singing a poem that washes over them as the scans swirl around the scene. The voices are from people who donated the data.
Please touch, touch you, touch us, pass us, oh touch, pass us through you, oh touch, move us through these bodies, make us touch, oh touch, make us bodies, touch, make touch, oh touch, touch us.
The idea of placing the data in concentric circles around the viewer developed largely from learning about examples of collective rather than individual concepts of data ownership. In neuroethics questions to guide ethical research in international brain initiatives, Karen Rammelfanger and her colleagues explained how work done by the IBI to coordinate brain mapping initiatives in China, Japan, Korea, Australia and the EU highlighted important differences between Western and Buddhist and Confucian societies in relation to data collection and ownership. In their paper, the authors explained that as Chinese, Japanese and Korean societies are typically more collectivists, medical decisions and ownership of a person's data is collective and family-based rather than individualistic. One participant who responded to the open call for scan data with a donation of over 20 data sets was Liz Ingram, who is herself an artist. Liz Ingram has created several artworks with her own medical scans, which have been acquired for ongoing diagnostic reasons since 2014 as part of her oncological care. In 2019, for instance, Ingram worked with her husband, Bernd Hildebrandt, to create Light Touch, a large silk fabric tent printed with images of her brain scan, being held tenderly in both by her own hands and her husband's hands. In this and subsequent works, they make strong aesthetic choices about how Ingram scans are presented, typically fragile, transparent, and intermingled with images of flowing water and poetic text. Through conversations and experimentation, it became clear that the artist, Liz Ingram, who donated the data, and her husband should collaborate on Your Data Body and be offered aesthetic control of the scenes that feature her data and become collaborators of the work. Together, we decided to situate Liz's scans within LiDAR scans of a disintegrating pioneer wood cabin near a lake in the boreal forest of Alberta, a location that has been central to Ingram and her Hildebrandt's life, past and present, as a beloved second home. Originally a homestead property and then a fishing camp, the location is now a collection of wooden cabins in varying states of decay and repair as the artist and her family are committed to rewild the property. In the third scene, rows of Ingram's many head scans sit within the ruins of the original Frank felt strongly that this cabin should be used to house the heads, as he found that in VR they resembled kilns or fire urns, and Hildebrand had strong childhood memories of a wood burner in that homestead cabin. In the fourth scene, a CT scan of Liz's chest and lungs rotates slowly within what is known as the Miller cabin. Final scene, we see Liz's fiery PET scan cradled within the tent cabin. In each scene is a poem written by Bernd Hildebrandt that either floats above Ingram's data, is nestled within it, or in the final scene sways through it back and forth. Hildebrandt wrote poetry after first seeing the renderings of his wife's data and feeling a deep sense of lack in them, a lack of recognition, a lack of ownership, and a lack of meaning. The poems are tender, mournful, sensuous, and full of longing, recalling shared intimate memories of each other's bodies in a very specific location, steeped in personal and social political history. As we heard in these clips, sound is crucial in these scenes, for which Smallwood and his graduate students went to the lakeside and made a library of field recordings of water, fire, wind in trees, birds and animals, and distant trains and traffic for the project. When reflecting on their experience of making these scenes, both Ingram and Hildebrandt said they found the process surprisingly therapeutic and positive. What once had been scans that were conjured fear and anxiety now felt loved and cared for. Working with the scans in VR and making aesthetic decisions about them gave them agency and ownership over their data. Interestingly, having now worked with the data in virtuality for so long, within the LiDAR scans of the cabins, when they now return there, they say that they actually feel the data within those cabins. Your data body was first exhibited as part of an exhibition titled Know Thyself as a Virtual Reality, alongside My Data Body. The VR experience was presented with an installation of a figure trapped inside a geodesic dome with video projections from the VR project. Many novel technical resources and workflows were created in the making of My Data and Your Data Body that have been now made openly available via the research project website and includes a GitHub repository of Unity projects, codes, and step-by-step videos and PDFs. As a way to further expand and diversify the Know Thyself project and exhibition, 5 guest artists were invited to come and work with the team and these resources to create their own VR artworks with their own medical scan data and situate them in their own diverse emotional, social, spiritual, and political realities. Artist Aaron Munson acquired functional MRI scans of his brain after extended periods of meditation and then intensive periods of social media use to question how addictive social media platforms are changing the way we place and hold our attention. Chelsea Campbell, who works through the lens of critical disability theory, placed her MRI scan into a LiDAR scan of her own bedroom, a site of rest and care. Darla Delbo hid her scan data in a large empty office space full of desks, of unattended desks, which display the views of nearest windows from Amazon Mechanical Turks workers, who she hired to work on the project in order to draw attention, as we heard earlier, to the huge, low-paid, invisible, and marginalised workforce that makes much of contemporary computing possible. Lisa Mays created a virtual world based on her genetic report from Ancestry and Me, which provided her with a quantitative breakdown of the geographical origins of her ancestors. And finally, Nicholas Hertz's VR artwork, A Mirror with No Reflection, focused on the experience of the MRI scanning itself, exploring the MR imaging machine as a liminal space that exists between knowing and not knowing about the dangers that might be hidden within the body. Thank you for your attention. I just want to, this has been part of a much larger project with many collaborators.
incredible presentation. Thank you so much.